5 consecutive losses. That is what Magdalena Fręch carries into Rome's Foro Italico today. 5 first-round exits in a row, stretching back to early March, each one shorter than the last, each one stripping another layer of self-belief from a player who stood in a WTA 500 final just 10 weeks ago. And now she draws Alex Eala, a 20-year-old ranked 3 spots above her whose entire 2026 has been a study in forward motion on hard courts and controlled frustration on clay. 2 players colliding at opposite velocities. One accelerating despite the surface beneath her feet. One decelerating regardless of it. This is not a match between a favorite and an underdog. This is something rarer and more volatile. A match between 2 players who both desperately need what a win here provides, but for entirely different reasons. Let me take you through what makes this particular collision so tactically rich. Magdalena Fręch arrived on tour as a teenager in 2014. 12 years of professional tennis. 12 years of accumulating scar tissue and court intelligence. Her career-high ranking of 22, achieved in November 2024, came on the back of a title in Guadalajara and increasingly consistent results that suggested she had finally found her competitive level. The pole plays from the baseline with an aggression that is more structural than explosive. She does not overpower opponents. She outpositions them. Her ground strokes carry weight without carrying extreme pace, and her break-point conversion rate, sitting at 48.6% in 2026, which places her in the 85th percentile on tour, tells you everything about how she competes in the moments that matter most. When Frech gets a look at your serve, she punishes it. That has been her calling card all season, even during the losses. But here is the paradox that defines her present moment. Frech reached the Merida final in early March, pushing Cristina Buxa to 3 sets in a 2-hour, 15-minute battle that showed every dimension of her game functioning at high capacity. She served well. She returned brilliantly. She constructed points with patience and finished them with conviction. And then she lost. Not badly. The scoreline was 6-1, 4-6, 6-4, but in the way that losing a final sometimes breaks open a fault line you did not know existed. Since that night in Mexico, Frech has not won a single match. Storm Hunter dismissed her in Indian Wells. McCartney Kessler beat her in Miami. Anna Bonder, her own doubles partner in Charleston, sent her packing. And Solana Sierra, ranked outside the top 70, ended her Madrid campaign before it began. 5 losses. 4 of them in the first round. The specifics of each defeat matter less than the cumulative effect. A player in this kind of streak does not lose confidence in neat, quantifiable increments. It erodes in patches. You stop trusting your second serve in big moments. You hesitate on approach shots you would normally take without thinking. You begin to see the scoreboard before you see the ball. Frech's 2026 clay record entering Rome reads 0 wins in 2 matches. Her overall season record sits at 10-11. These are not numbers that describe a player in crisis. They describe a player in drift, unable to locate the version of herself that made a final 2 months ago. And then there is Eala. Alex Eala's 2026 season tells 2 stories depending on which surface you measure it against. On hard courts, the Filipina has been a revelation. She beat Donna Vekic at Kuyang. She outlasted Diana Yastremska at Indian Wells. She ground down Magdalena Fręch's compatriot in 3 sets at Miami. She climbed to a career high of 29 in the WTA rankings in March, posting a win-loss record that placed her firmly among the tour's most improved players. Her game on fast surfaces is built around reactive speed, clean ball striking from both wings, and an increasingly mature understanding of when to absorb and when to attack. On hard courts, Eala can beat anyone in the top 40 and trouble anyone in the top 20. On clay, the story fractures. Eala's 2026 clay record entering this match stands at 2 wins against 3 losses. She beat Julia Grabher in Linz, a solid if unspectacular opening result against a home favorite. She beat Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova in Madrid, a composed 6-3, 6-3 performance against a 34-year-old veteran that showcased her baseline discipline at its sharpest. But between and around those victories sit the losses that define her clay challenge. Yelena Ostapenko dismantled her in Linz after a tight first set. Leylah Fernandez raced through a 6-1 first set in Stuttgart before Eala found her footing too late. And Elise Mertens, steady, experienced, tactically immaculate, taught her a 6-2, 6-1 lesson in Madrid about what happens when your first serve percentage drops below the threshold where your return game can compensate. The Madrid loss to Mertens is particularly instructive. Eala won just 53% of her first serve points. Mertens won 93%. That gap is not about talent or desire. It is about the way clay strips protective layers from your service games. On hard courts, Eala's serve functions as a neutral tool. It starts points without creating immediate vulnerability. On clay, where the ball sits up longer in the strike zone, where returners have an extra half-second to read spin and placement, that same serve becomes a liability. Opponents who would never threaten her service games on hard courts suddenly find themselves in extended baseline rallies from the return position, rallies where Eala's hard court instincts, the desire to accelerate, to take the ball early, to end points quickly, collide with a surface that rewards patience and punishes ambition. So we arrive at today's match with a clear tactical picture. Frech, despite her losing streak, remains a dangerous opponent on clay specifically because of her break-point conversion ability. If Eala's serve misbehaves the way it did against Mertens, Frech will punish every opening. Her career clay record of 55.6%, 89 wins from 160 matches, shows a player who belongs on this surface even when the rest of her game is struggling. Clay has always been Frech's second-best surface over a career sample, and her movement patterns, her willingness to stay in rallies beyond the comfort zone, her understanding of angles on a slower court, all of these remain intact even when confidence is low. But confidence is low, and that changes the tactical equation in Eala's favor. A player on a 5-match losing streak does not process break-point opportunities the same way she does when winning. The conversion rate that looks so impressive on paper requires belief in the specific moment, belief that this particular break point, on this particular day, belongs to you. Frech's numbers say she should convert nearly half her opportunities. But numbers accumulated across a season include matches where she felt invincible. Today, she will not feel invincible. She will feel tentative. And tentative players on break points tend to wait for errors rather than construct winners. They hit one more ball than they need to, hoping the opponent will crack first. Eala, by contrast, arrives in Rome with a strange psychological advantage: freedom from expectation. Everyone knows she struggles on clay. Her fans know it. Philippine tennis media discusses it openly. She withdrew from the Catalonia Open last week, a WTA 125 event where she could have scraped together easy ranking points, and chose instead to train in preparation for Rome. That decision tells you something about her mindset. She is not chasing volume. She is chasing growth. She does not need this match to prove she belongs on clay. She has already accepted the learning curve. What she needs is something more specific, evidence that the Pavlyuchenkova performance was not an anomaly. Evidence that her baseline discipline in Madrid's opening round can be sustained over a longer arc. And this is where Rome's conditions shift the calculation. Unlike Madrid, where altitude makes the ball fly faster and bounces sit up higher, Rome plays at sea level. The clay is heavier. The ball bites into the surface more aggressively. Rallies extend naturally. For Eala, this could cut both ways. Longer rallies mean more time under the pressure of patient opponents. But longer rallies also mean more time to find rhythm, more time for her reactive game to settle into the kind of baseline exchanges where she can use her footwork advantage against a taller, less mobile opponent. Frech stands 1.71 m. Not tall by modern WTA standards, but taller than Eala, and her reach allows her to cover angles that shorter players must sprint to reach. On paper, this should advantage Frech in extended rallies. In practice, mobility matters more than reach on clay, and Frech's movement in her recent losses has looked heavy, not injured, but sluggish in the way that a player who expects to lose moves slightly later than a player who expects to win. There is a moment that occurs in every match between a player riding momentum and a player dragging baggage. It comes early, usually in the 4th or 5th game, when the player in form faces her first real test of nerve. She has either broken serve or held comfortably, and the opponent makes a small push, wins a couple of points in a row, creates a moment of uncertainty. What happens next defines the match. The confident player responds with aggression. The uncertain player waits. For Eala, that moment will likely come on Frech's serve. Eala's return game, while not yet elite by the standards of the tour's best, has improved markedly in 2026. At Indian Wells, she broke Yastremska 5 times. In Miami, she broke Lynette 4 times. Against Pavlyuchenkova in Madrid, she broke 3 times across 2 sets. These numbers suggest a player whose reading of serve patterns has developed beyond where it was 12 months ago. Against Frech, whose serve averages 155.7 kilometers per hour, while below the tour average, Eala should find returning opportunities early and often. The question is whether Eala can hold when Frech's break-point conversion comes knocking. Because it will come. Even struggling, Frech manages to create break opportunities with remarkable consistency. Her 2026 numbers show 3.9 breaks won per match, which places her in the 93rd percentile on tour. She does not need her serve to be working well to win break points. She needs her return and her rally game to create the pressure, and those skills do not disappear because you have lost 5 matches in a row. But here is what favors Eala specifically today. Last year at this same tournament, she was demolished 6-0, 6-1 by Marta Kostyuk. That memory lingers. But it lingers differently than you might expect. Players who have experienced a public humiliation at a venue return the following year with something between anger and resolve. They remember exactly how it felt to walk off that court. They remember the silence in the tunnel afterward. And they use it. Eala chose to come back to Rome. She chose to skip a smaller event and prepare specifically for this moment. That tells you where her mind is. The draw also incentivizes aggression. If Eala beats Frech, she faces Sinyu Wang in the second round, a player she lost to in Auckland earlier this year. Beyond that lurks Elena Rybakina, the second seed. The draw gets harder, not easier. Which means this first round is not just about beating Frech. It is about establishing a way of competing on clay that can carry through multiple matches against increasingly difficult opposition. Eala cannot afford to win ugly here and then hope to upgrade her performance later. She needs to win in a way that teaches her something about herself on this surface. For Frech, the stakes are both simpler and more painful. She needs to stop the bleeding. A 6th consecutive loss would drop her ranking further from the career high she worked 12 years to achieve. It would mean entering the French Open qualifying conversation rather than direct acceptance. It would mean that the Merida final, that brilliant, agonizing 3-set battle that proved she could compete at the highest level, becomes a memory rather than a foundation. Tennis at this level is unforgiving in its treatment of losing streaks. The tour does not pause while you rebuild confidence. It presents you with another opponent, another city, another court, and asks you to perform before you feel ready. Frech has not had the luxury of working through her problems in practice. She has had to work through them in public, losing each time, carrying each loss into the next match like a stone in her pocket. What I expect to see today is Eala seizing the early initiative. Her energy level in opening sets has been high all season, even in losses. She tends to compete fiercely through the first 5 or 6 games before the surface-specific difficulties compound. If she can break Frech early, before the pole finds her serving rhythm, the match dynamic shifts decisively. Frech's mental fragility right now means that falling behind early could trigger the same passive patterns that led to first-round exits in her last 4 tournaments. If Frech holds early and creates early break chances, though, the match becomes about endurance. About whether Eala's serve can withstand sustained return pressure from someone who converts nearly half her break opportunities. About whether Eala's footwork can sustain the kind of 20-shot rallies that Roman clay demands through a second and potentially third set. These are open questions. They do not have predetermined answers. But here is what I believe, sitting with all the evidence in front of me. Eala wins this match. Not because she is the better player in some abstract, permanent sense. Frech's career achievements outweigh hers. Frech's experience dwarfs hers. Frech's historical clay record is superior. Eala wins because she arrives carrying the energy of a season moving forward, while Frech arrives carrying the weight of 2 months moving backward. Because Eala's hard-court confidence translates into baseline decisiveness even on uncomfortable surfaces, while Frech's losing streak translates into baseline hesitation even on comfortable ones. Because in a match between two players of roughly equal ranking, roughly equal current form, the one who believes she deserves to be winning at 4-4 in a tight second set is the one who will hold nerve. And right now, that player is Eala. I see a first set going to Eala 6-4, with an early break and then a tense hold at 5-4 where she faces break points and survives through serve +1 aggression. I see a second set that is Messier Frech finding her return timing and breaking early, Eala breaking back immediately with clean forehand winners down the line. The set leveling out before Eala pulls away late with superior movement and decision-making in the rallies that extend beyond 10 shots. Something like 7-5 or 6-4 again. Straight sets. Competitive but clear. This is the kind of victory that does not make highlight reels. It does not produce viral moments or dramatic comebacks. It produces something quieter and more important for Eala's development, a match where she competed on clay against a legitimate opponent, maintained her level through inevitable adversity, and walked off court knowing that her preparation worked. Knowing that Rome can be different from Stuttgart, from that first set against Fernandez, from the Mertens demolition. Knowing that clay is not her enemy. It is simply a language she is still learning to speak fluently. For Frech, a loss here extends the streak to 6 and forces difficult conversations about scheduling, about confidence, about whether something fundamental needs to change in her approach. Those conversations are painful but necessary. She remains a top 50 player with a title and a final in the last 18 months. Losing streaks end. They always end. But they do not end against opponents who are younger, faster, more motivated, and competing without the psychological debt of recent failure. They end in smaller moments, against more forgiving opponents, on days when something finally clicks back into place. Today is not that day for Frech. Today belongs to Eala.